Hey guys, Ben here from Ad Coach, and today I want to talk a little bit about the recent news around a Google and Facebook antitrust lawsuit. So the rumors around this lawsuit, or press around it, started in around December of 2020. And now in January, there's a little bit more information. A recent New York Times article came out detailing a little bit more about this. Link in the description to that article. And the issue at hand is a bit complicated, so I want to take a minute to try to break it down and explain kind of the genesis of what's going on here. So essentially, this involves a process called header bidding, which was invented a few years ago and essentially is an existential threat to Google. So the reason for that is that if you go to a website and you see banner ads on that website, it's likely that that site is not directly selling each one of those ads. What they are doing is they are programmatically fulfilling that ad, and they work with a programmatic partner who allows for advertisers to see that available inventory, bid on it, and serve the ad in real time. Now, I have more detail about header bidding and waterfalls in my introduction to programmatic class, so if you want to get really detailed about it, I recommend you check that out. Again, link in the description for that. But for the sake of today, what I want to explain is that previous to header bidding, what would happen is that a site would work with a programmatic provider, Google being the largest, and that provider would connect that website to demand sources, demand being advertisers. And that could be Google, that could be Facebook, that could be companies like OpenX or other DSPs and SSPs in the space. So what would happen is as soon as the website loads, it would send a signal to this exchange platform saying, hey, there's available inventory. Is anyone interested in buying it? And a signal would go to the first call on that waterfall. And if they have a demand partner, an advertiser who wants to buy, they would place a bid, win the ad, serve the ad, end of transaction. If that first one in the waterfall said, no, I don't have any available demand, it would go to the second, third, fourth, fifth, so on, until either somebody filled that impression or there was no demand and no ad would serve at all. So what was happening is that sites were using Google for the most part. Google has their own exchange, their own demand platform. So Google was prioritizing themselves over everybody else. So they were winning the majority of these ad calls because sites were using Google to process the ad call. And what was happening is people who were second, third, fourth in line in that waterfall were saying, we didn't even get a chance to buy this inventory because we didn't even see it. Google's winning it before we even got a chance to see it. So a process called a header bidding was developed, which essentially gave everybody else the opportunity to see that ad call before Google. So they would say, hey, we're going to see it before even Google gets a chance. And if it's inventory we want to buy, we can make a bid and we can serve that ad and we can win that auction before Google does. That was essentially an existential threat to Google because obviously they started losing a ton of money when other players were winning those ads and serving those impressions before Google got a chance. So in order to kind of curb that threat, Google developed their own internal bidding system, kind of walled garden, and said, we're going to allow for this true auction. It's not going to be a waterfall. And they allowed other tech platforms to plug into it. And they allowed publishers to say, you can select however many tech companies you want, all plugged in. You don't have to do any new coding. We're going to develop it for you. And that's a great idea in theory, but Google being Google, they said, okay, you have to conform to our own terms. And some of those terms have to do with the amount of data being shared and the time in which you have to place that. So first on data, the Google platform has a lot of data, a number of different users, but they weren't necessarily sharing all of that. And advertisers really look for data to determine what inventory they want to buy and how much they're willing to pay for it. So the more data an advertiser has, the more likely they are to place a bid and the higher price they're willing to pay for it. Google was limiting how much data they would share within this bidding platform. So even though there are multiple demand sources in there available to bid, if they didn't have things like gender or location or other demographic features that they generally look for, then they either may not place a bid or they may not pay as much as they normally would. The second thing is time. Google required that these transactions happen within 160 milliseconds, which is, as you can imagine, very fast. So if you were a demand-side platform that wasn't able to process that transaction in 160 milliseconds, you couldn't work in this bidding platform. Now, most large ones were able to do so, but it involves development resources and servers, and you have to have a platform able to do that. What we're talking about in this lawsuit is essentially Google agreed to let Facebook come into that platform and be one of those partners bidding along with everybody else in their bidding platform. But they gave Facebook preferential terms. The first one is sharing more data. They agreed to share more data with Facebook than other platforms get. So off the bat, you can imagine, well, if Facebook's getting more information, then they're going to bid more often and they're going to bid at a higher rate and they're going to win more deals because they're getting more information than anybody else. The second thing was, instead of 160 milliseconds, they gave Facebook up to 300 milliseconds, which is nearly twice the amount of time to bid on that impression. So it gives Facebook a little bit more time to process the data that they're getting and decide, do they want to place that bid? Now, when you're talking about milliseconds in the digital world, that can be a really, really big difference. So those two factors alone are a really big competitive advantage that Google is supposedly giving Facebook that would put every other tech platform at a disadvantage and kind of takes away from the idea of an open bidding system to begin with. And you can imagine a lot of tech companies may say, well, now we need to see the ad before Facebook and Google see it because they're going to have a clear advantage over what we can do. They also have preferred terms such as a guaranteed win amount. So Google is saying that they're going to guarantee Facebook will win a certain amount of impressions, which is a really big issue because that could mean even if another platform bids faster and at a higher rate, are they going to prefer Facebook over that other platform to make sure they get to that guaranteed win rate? That is kind of unknown. However, for the publishers, this could all spell more money. If you're talking about more demand, more data, guaranteed win rates, and potentially higher spend, publishers using this Google system could see an increase in revenue. So for them, they're not really putting up much of a fight. They may benefit from this. For other tech platforms, though, clearly it puts them at a disadvantage, which is where this lawsuit came from, filed by a number of different states. And according to the New York Times article, the lawsuit includes the term antitrust 20 times in that lawsuit. So again, a complicated system here. We're going to see how it all plays out. We'll probably learn more about how it actually works, what the terms are. Google is saying that this isn't anything new, that they always give preferential terms and deals to larger spenders and larger clients, and that's par for the course in the ad tech world, and that's not entirely untrue. You do negotiate better deals for bigger clients, but when we're talking about Google and Facebook and giving people preferential treatment in what is essentially a monopoly of this programmatic process, it's not really a monopoly, but they're so big that it kind of acts like a monopoly, especially when you're combining Google and Facebook into one system. So if you have questions about this, feel free to leave a comment in this comment section below. I'll try to respond to as much as I can. Again, if you want more detail around header bidding and waterfalls, my programmatic course goes into that in much more detail. So I'd recommend checking that out. And please subscribe and like this for more content on the Ad Coach channel. So thanks, and I'll see you in another video soon.